Hi, thus far we have been learning how to talk about events in the present when we talk about verb conjugation. The difficulty is that a lot of things that happen to us didn't happen only in the present. We lived them in the present, but now they're in the past. So sometimes we want to tell people about things that happened to us in the past, or stories, or vacations that we took, or childhood events. Well, how would we do that? How would we discuss what happened to us in the past in Spanish with our friends, or maybe with a different company that we're with? Well, the method that we might use to discuss the past is called the pretérito. We also use the imperfecto, but we will deal with more on that later. For now, we're going to focus on learning how to speak about the past using the pretérito. Now, you will remember that when we learned the present tense, we said, right, that the ending told us two things. It said to us, first, who is speaking, and second, where we are in time. So the endings that we learned in the present tense always told us that we were in a present situation. Now we are going to learn endings that will tell us that we are always talking about a past event. The ending itself tells us that we are in the preterite. Therefore, where we are in time is in the past, and that we are talking about past events. So that means that in order to learn the preterite, we have to learn a whole new set of endings with which to discuss past events. Now, with the preterite, like with the present, we have four categories of verbs. We have regular verbs in AR, ER, and IR. We have irregular in first person singular, or in yo. We have irregular stem changing, and then we also have just plain irregular. For today and for today's lesson, we will only focus on learning the regular endings for AR, ER, and IR preterite verbs. And we will deal with the stem changing and the others in another video. Now, you'll notice that I've written these endings here on the board. The endings for the preterite in the regular sense are going to be y, aste, o, amos, estáis, aron for all AR verbs, and they will be in the ER and IR verbs y, iste, yo, imos, estéis, yeron. So that means that this ending, if we see this ending on the back of a verb, we will know that we are in a past event and that we are using the preterite to discuss this past event. So how might we do that in a verb conjugation? Remember that since we're talking about the regular preterites, what that means is the stem will remain regular. So we will conjugate them by using the regular root of the stem and then just tacking on the preterite tense, similar to how we would with the present. And in some ways, that should be old hat for you. Here are some examples. Hablar. Let's say I wanted to say I spoke in the present tense. I would say, yo hablé. Tú hablaste. Él, ella, usted habló. Nosotros hablamos. Vosotros hablasteis. Ellos, ellas, ustedes hablaron. And again, with ER and IR, I would do the same. Now, notice one thing about the ER and IR verbs. You probably already saw it, and that is that they follow the same ending pattern. So there's not two ending patterns like in the present for ER and IR verbs. There's actually just one. So for both ER and IR verbs, they will follow this exact same pattern. So I will say, for an ER verb, I would say yo comí, but an IR verb, I would also say yo viví. Tú comiste, tú viviste. Él, ella comió, él, ella vivió. Nosotros comimos, nosotros vivimos. Vosotros comisteis, vosotros vivisteis. Ellos, ellas comieron, ellos, ellas vivieron. So they are actually the exact same ending for both ER and IR. Now you might have noticed one other tricky little thing, and that is that there are accent marks on the first person and also on the third person in both of these cases. These accent marks cannot be forgotten, because this accent mark, for example, tells me the difference between habló without an accent mark, which is how I would say I spoke in the present tense, and él habló, which is how I would say he spoke in the past tense. It also tells me where to put emphasis in the verb and how to pronounce it. So the accent marks cannot be forgotten. They are not optional. So for this, what I would like you to do for homework, and I would like you to choose 2 preterites, one from each category, so one from the AR and then one from the ER and IR. Of course, not one that I already conjugated here on the board, but one that is unconjugated as of yet. And I would like you to choose one and conjugate it in the preterite. So choose one from the AR and ER and one from the AR and then one from the ER and IR category, and write it on a note card and bring it into class. And of course, write your name on it so that you can get credit for it and be prepared to share. Thanks, and I'll see you in class.